Screen is also visible to all.
Yes, sir.
Fine. So good morning all. So we'll start with the next topic in the casting module, that is on the investment casting process. So investment casting process, it is also known as lost wax process. So this is a different process than the earlier discussed processes. So in this process, the pattern is made up of wax. So generally, the pattern is uh, made using a process known as say die injection molding, or sometimes also by rapid prototyping. So this word RP here, basically this stands for rapid prototyping. So I will explain what is this. So rapid prototyping is one of the you can say a new manufacturing process wherein we use the SolidWorks or the CAD models. So basically, in this case, we develop the products using CAD models. So CAD, I already discussed. It is computer aided designing and drawing. Computer aided drawing. So these CAD models are basically used to create the product. So one of the example of rapid prototyping can be considered using a popular uh, technique these days, if you are hearing about it, that is 3D printing. So 3D printing is a rapid prototyping technique. So why this is known as rapid prototyping? So rapid means in very less time you can create a product. But these techniques, which come in the umbrella of rapid prototyping, they may not be suitable for mass production. Means they can produce few number of parts very quickly, but these techniques cannot produce large number of parts very quickly. So in case of investment casting, the rapid prototyping technique is used to create the pattern. So this pattern is made up of wax. Sometimes polystyrene is also used, but more with investment casting, wax is predominantly the pattern material. So once you have this pattern which is created of wax, so then what we do is we dip this pattern in a slurry of refractory materials. So this is refractory materials which include fine silica and binders. So binders in this case are mixture of water, ethyl silicate and acids. So essentially what you are doing is you are coating the pattern with this refractory material by dipping it repeatedly in the slurry. So what is slurry? Slurry is basically mixture of this refractory material, which is a combination of silica and binders like water, ethyl silicate and acids. And the pattern is repeatedly coated in this refractory slurry in order to increase the thickness of this coating layer. So increased thickness will impart better strength, and in this case what is being done is this pattern is getting invested around this refractory material slurry. So that is why the name is known as the investment casting process. So once basically what you are doing is you are dipping this in this coating again and again. So after the desired thickness is achieved in this case, so what you do is then you take this coated wax pattern to a furnace. Here autoclave basically is indicating a furnace. So in this furnace, what we are doing is we are basically applying heat, and when we apply heat, the wax which is present inside this coated pattern. So what is happening? This wax gets melted out, and you are left with this cavity to yourself. And then you take this empty or the mold from which the wax is removed, and you pour the molten metal, and then you allow the molten metal to get solidified in this mold cavity. And upon once the solidification is complete, basically you break the mold to remove the casting product, and this casting product will be a replica of this pattern. So here I have discussed in the previous slide regarding the rapid prototyping, and these patterns can also be made by injection molding. So you see here, so this is the injection molding process where you have a die. So this is a metallic die which is made up of say tool steel, and this die it has a cavity, and in this die basically you insert the wax here, and then you allow it to solidify, and then this is how you obtain the wax pattern using injection molding process. And if the number of parts are quite small, so they can be clubbed together in this pattern assembly, and then you do the coating, allow the coating to get solidified, then you basically melt this wax by placing it in a furnace. Then basically what you're doing, you pour the molten material in this empty mold cavity, and upon solidification you can remove the product. So this investment casting process, it has some advantages. So one of the most important advantage is it can cast very complex parts. Complex means in complex in terms of their shape. Then second important advantage of this process is it imparts very good surface finish with very high dimensional accuracy. So what this means is that the surface of the product which is developed using investment casting process, it is very smooth, and at the same time the dimension of this product is also very accurate, and in other words I can say the tolerances are very low. So what are tolerances? So tolerances are basically acceptable deviations from the actual dimension. So acceptable tolerances is acceptable deviation deviation from the actual size. So why these tolerances are provided? Because no manufacturing process can give you the same value of dimensions. So always there will be slight variation in the dimensions. So there is an acceptable range which is defined for all these dimensions on different manufacturing processes, and this acceptable deviation is known as the tolerances. And in case of investment casting process, these tolerances are very, very low. Secondly, this process is very suitable to cast very thin sections. So very narrow sections can also be cast up to 0.4 millimeters. And this process can handle almost all the metals. Especially this is a very good process for high melting point metals. So metals which have high melting points, so those type of metals are very suitable with this process. So but at the same time, considering all these advantages, the process it has a limitation in terms of the part size that it can handle. So why this is so? Because very heavy parts cannot be cast using this investment casting process, because the thickness of the layer in which the pattern is invested, you cannot go to a very high value. So you can understand the mold by itself cannot handle very heavy or very large amount of molten material. So at the most, parts up to 1.4 tons have been cast with a diameter of 1.5 meters. And this process is one of the most expensive process. So the limitation of this process is it is a complicated process because it is a two-step. So I discussed it is a two-step process where in step one, basically you are producing the pattern. So first to produce the pattern made up of wax, it itself is a tedious process, and first step is pattern production, and step two is basically the casting process. So because of these two steps which are there in this process, the process becomes complicated, and at the same time it is very expensive. So only in case of products which basically justify to basically pick an expensive process. So in this regard only this investment casting process is widely used. So the most popular products which are made using this are the gas turbine blades used in aircraft engines. So gas turbine blades is a example of a product which is made using this process. So these gas turbine blades are made up of super alloys which are very high melting points, and this type of products they can justify the expensive cost of this investment casting process. So this was all about the investment casting, and the next process that we will briefly discuss, it is about the vacuum casting process. So vacuum casting process is basically a process in which the role of vacuum is there to basically get the metal inside the cavity. So in this case, what is done? It is we have this mold. Again, this mold is made up of sand, but it is basically cured sand with some binder, and this is basically cured, or the strength is enhanced by curing it in amine vapor. So amine vapor is basically a product derived from ammonia. This is binder is basically I think it is some this binder is again, yeah, it is based on amine based compounds, and this amine vapor is basically used to cure the sand mold. So in this case, the mold is placed inside a holder which is connected to a vacuum system. So this system, when connected to vacuum, and you then plunge this mold assembly into the molten metal pool. So here you have the molten metal. So upon application of vacuum, so you create a low pressure inside the mold, and this will allow the molten material to get filled inside the cavity. So what happens in this regard? So we are not using the gravity basically to bring the molten metal inside the cavity. Rather, this vacuum is being used. This generally basically removes all the air pockets in between, and the casting it gets a very good surface finish with minimal defects. But again, this type of process can also not handle very large parts. Small parts can be done, especially parts with a thin cross section. And this process is readily automated. So all this movement of this cavity inside the molten material and removing it out, this is done with the help of a robotic arm. Then this is the last process that we are discussing in the casting part. So this is regarding the centrifugal casting process. Centrifugal casting process is a process which utilizes the inertial forces which are caused by rotation to distribute the molten metal inside the cavity. So if you take example of a pipe, so these large pipes, they are made up of, say, pipe made up of cast iron. So these pipes, they can be made using this process. So this process has this arrangement of a mold. So this is again a permanent mold. Permanent mold is there. So this mold is continuously rotating. So this mold is rotated with the help of this driver roller and a free roller which supports this mold. So this is rotating continuously. And what we do is during the mold is getting rotated, we pour in the molten metal inside this rotating mold. So because of the inertial forces, what will happen, the molten material, it will be pushed towards the sides of this mold. So what is going to happen, it will, when it gets pushed because of the rotation, the centrifugal force it will experience. So it will get pushed towards the side of the mold. So side of the mold is basically a pattern in this case, which is, say, for example, a shape of a pipe. And then you basically are continuously rotating it and then allowing it to solidify. So this will basically create you a pipe shaped object which can later on be removed. So this type of process is I can say is quite low cost. You do not need any pattern or you do not need any core in this regard. No chaplet is required, but only by using the centrifugal forces you can develop the complete product. So examples are like pipe and cylinder lining. Yeah, these can be usually made using this process. So if there are more processes, there are several other processes also in casting. But again, since this is a level 1 course on product realization technologies, we are not going to discuss the other processes in casting. Rather, we will stop discussing about casting up beyond the centrifugal casting process. So the idea of this module was to give you an overview of what is casting, what are the different processes used in casting, then how to calculate the solidification time. We also studied some details about various defects which creep into cast products and how we can minimize them. Just to conclude this module on casting, that is on the centrifugal casting, so since it is a rotational based process in centrifugal casting, so we get improved homogeneity. So generally the dense material or the metal, it gets pushed away to a larger extent because of higher density, so the mass is higher, and it is having very good accuracy, but it has a limitation with shapes. So only cylindrical shapes with uh, cylindrical shapes can be cast. So no other shapes are possible using this centrifugal casting process. So with this, I basically conclude this casting module, and now I will just go to the next module on the forming. So we will discuss about your doubts in this module once I complete today's deliberation on the forming process. So next module that is lined up is basically about the forming. So forming is basically a new, you can say, class of manufacturing processes which basically rely on changing shape of the product by applying these forces which induce stresses which are beyond the yield stress, but it is within the fracture stress. So in this regard, what is done is basically what we are doing is we heat the piece or the work piece, but do not melt it. So it is the heating may be done or may not be done depending on the case. But the forming processes, they largely rely on changing shape by applying external force. So what is important here, we are not melting. So forming is what it is basically. Yes. So forming is what it is. It is basically involving change in shape. So how this change is achieved? By applying force. And this force will basically induce a stress which will be basically beyond the yield stress. Okay, but this will be below the fracture stress. Means you will just change the shape, but you will not break the part. So this is the basic philosophy of all the forming processes that we will be discussing in this module. So we'll discuss details about this process. So forming, basically it involves uh, the change in the desired shape and size, which is obtained by applying force, and we are basically plastically deforming the workpiece. So we discussed sometime in the beginning. So when the force is applied and you do not cross the elastic limit, means you are within the elastic limit. So when you remove the externally applied force, what happens? You basically regain the original shape. But the intention of these forming processes is to change the shape. So this means the force has to be applied, and the stress value which will be generated or which will be induced, this will be in the plastic domain. So this means even if when you remove the externally applied force, the change in shape will be permanent. So this is the basic philosophy of it, and this is what I was just mentioning. Point number two is that the stress that is induced is basically greater than the yield stress. So yield stress is basically a point of inflection from where the uh, plastic domain begins and we complete the elastic domain. So yielding is basically when the change in shape starts to become permanent. So the stresses that are induced, they are greater than the yield strength of a material, but they are less than the fracture strength. So why it is less than the fracture strength? Because if you exceed the fracture strength for any material, so in that regard, you will basically break the pieces into, or you will fracture the pieces. That is not what we want in the forming process. So it is a very delicate process in which the force has to be applied just so as to you just remain in the plastic domain. You do not remain in the elastic domain, or you do not remain in the fracture domain. So essentially there are three domains that any material experiences. So one is the elastic domain, then basically you enter the plastic domain, and beyond plastic domain you enter the fracture domain. So what is happening here? So we are applying the force such that we remain in this plastic domain in the forming processes, because in fracture you will end up breaking the pieces, which is not wanted. And if you remain in the elastic domain, you will basically not change the shape permanently, rather you will regain the original shape once you remove the externally applied force. So in order to basically accomplish this idea of plastically deforming the product or plastically deforming the workpiece in this regard, so different type of stresses can be induced on the workpiece, which can be a combination of tensile stresses, compressive stresses, bending stresses, shearing, or you see combination of all these may also be used. So practically speaking, there may be combination of all these processes, but for the sake of understanding, they can be simplified to a larger extent. So we will be seeing the details of these different processes which use these type of different type of stresses which are induced. Then forming is one of the most economical process also, because in this case there is almost no loss of material. So if we see processes like machining and all, so in machining there are several chips are produced which basically contribute to loss of material. But in this case, the forming processes are also known as zero processes, because in this case only change in shape is happening. Okay, so there are no waste, almost no waste is produced in this case. So these are one of the most economical processes also considered, but so in this case, the forming processes, they also have a, I can say, a benefit, an added benefit, that whenever you subject any material or any product to a forming processes, the strength of these processes, they also improve. So the strength of these processes is improved by a phenomenon known as strain hardening. So we will discuss what is strain hardening now. So strain hardening is basically hardening of a material with deformation. So how this happens? So I will give you a practical example. So if you look at microstructure of any engineering material, so we are looking at the microstructure. So to look at the microstructure of any engineering material, so what you do is you take the piece or a sample from it, and you basically polish that sample to a mirror finish situation where you get it very smooth surface. And then what you do is you selectively basically etch the surface of the polished material using a suitable etching reagent. And what you will observe, that almost all the engineering materials, when they solidify, say during casting and all, so they basically develop the structure of grains and grain boundaries. So what we are getting? We are getting a structure made up of grains. So this is the grain, and this region here is known as the grain boundary. So this grain and grain boundary, basically they play a very important role in deciding the strength of any engineering material. Now what happens that whenever there is an externally applied force, so if there are no grain boundaries, the grains, they under the influence of externally applied force, they may slip or they may fracture under the influence of externally applied force if there are no grain boundaries. If the grain boundaries are present, so these grain boundaries they basically impede the movement of these grains, thereby increasing the strength of the material. So what happens in most of these forming processes, as you see here in this figure, so this figure is basically a process known as rolling. So what is happening in this rolling, you have these two rolls, roll 1 and roll 2, and you are basically passing a workpiece from this end and taking it out from the other end. So during the course of this rolling process, what is happening, the thickness of the workpiece is reducing, but at the same time, since it is an open process, so one other dimension of the product will get increased so that the total volume remains conserved. So in this regard, maybe the length increases. But what happens here? So when you compress this product under the influence of these rolls, so you see in the same this is before and here it is after. So in the before and after situation, what is happening? The total value or total number of grain boundaries, it increases in the given product. So when the number of grain boundaries they increase, so basically they will impede slip of the grains under the externally applied force. And in that situation, basically the strength of the material will increase. So what these grain boundaries are doing, basically they are pinning these grains together. So when they pin it together, so the grains they cannot slide or they cannot slip. So that is why the deformation becomes very difficult. So this is how the strain hardening works. And in almost all the forming processes, the strain hardening is observed, and it is used to basically enhance the strength of the uh, material. So grain boundaries are also known as the dislocation regions, where basically these type of regions basically they decrease the mean free path. So when the mean free path of any grain decreases, so in that situation the strength of the material will increase. So grain boundaries, what are these? So grain boundaries are basically regions where impurity in the atoms they segregate, and they can then retard the motion of the grains, thereby increasing the strength even at elevated temperature. So this is the whole concept, how the strain hardening is there and how it increases the strength of the material. Next important concept which is there in case of the forming processes, that is a role of temperature, that also we will discuss. But before that, I will show some photographs of the products which are made using different forming processes like the rails, car bodies are there, aluminum extrusions are there, used in various structural applications. This type of forged products, all these products are there. These are made up of, again, with one or more of the forming processes, wires and all that you see. So all these products are some of the representative examples of the products that can be made using these forming processes. So forming, and now we understand it is basically a plastic flow of the material in the solid state without deterioration. So in this case, we can also reorient the grains in a preferred direction. And at the same time, the forming processes, they have a very high capital cost. Means if you want to make any product with forming, so basically the machinery or the equipment that is used in forming processes is very expensive. So that high capital cost is basically offset by producing large number of parts. So often you will observe the forming processes, they are capable to handle mass production type of scenarios in which the high number of pieces basically offset the initially invested high capital cost. So that is why large production volume is required to justify the high capital cost for the forming processes. So this last point also I already discussed, that in forming processes there is almost no material wastage, because in this case you are not melting, so tendency of formation of oxides is very less, and at the same time no chips are being produced, so therefore material wastage is almost negligible. So next is the important role of temperature in the forming processes. So temperature plays a very important role in all these forming processes, and that temperature is also used to classify these forming processes in three categories that I will discuss. So what is the important role of temperature? So temperature basically influences the ductility and strength. So whenever the temperature will increase, the strength of the material will decrease and the ductility will increase. So this is very same if you see a block of a butter and you increase the temperature of that block of a butter. So what you will observe then, if you pass through a knife through it, you can easily pass through a knife if either the knife is heated or the surrounding temperature is high in the block where the block of butter is placed. But if the surrounding temperature is less, the strength of the block butter is quite high. So in that regard, you will have to apply more force in order to cut it apart. So similar analogy exists even in forming processes, where basically you are trying to change the shape, but when you increase the temperature of what? So temperature of the workpiece. In this case, the strength may decrease or the ductility will increase. So this basically promotes ease of deformation. So you place a heated workpiece and you place a cold workpiece. So what you will observe that to, uh, to bring the change in shape, it will be easier in case of a heated workpiece rather than a workpiece which is at room temperature. So this increase in temperature is basically applied to extract these effects of ease of deformation. So ease of deformation is linked again to the energy consumption in the process. If it is easier to deform a product or a workpiece, so energy consumption will reduce. So companies that use the forming processes to form products, so they play in this domain of increasing the temperature of the workpiece, which will provide the ease of deformation, thereby reducing the energy consumption during the process. So based on this working temperature, so working temperature is the term given to the temperature which is used to basically make the process either it is will be a hot working process or it will be a cold working process. So there is a specific temperature which I will discuss now. So this specific temperature which is taken into consideration is known as the recrystallization temperature. If the processing is done above the recrystallization temperature, it becomes hot working. If the processing is done below the recrystallization temperature, so then it becomes the cold working. So we will try to understand today what is this recrystallization temperature. So based on this flow of or the temperature value above the recrystallization temperature, we will consider as hot working. Below it will be a cold working. In between we can consider as warm working. So this recrystallization temperature is almost 40% of the melting temperature. So Tm is basically the melting temperature for any material. So this temperature value is basically in the range. I cannot very accurately say it is 0.3. Generally, it ranges 0.3 to 0.6, 0.3 to 0.6 of the melting temperature. This value of recrystallization temperature is very important, and if the processing is being done above the recrystallization temperature, it is considered as hot working or hot forming process. If the processing is done below the recrystallization temperature, it is considered as cold working process. So what happens in this recrystallization temperature? So recrystallization temperature is basically a particular temperature, of course, below the melting point of the material. So where the grains, which I discussed, so at that value, the force, suppose the grains are there. So if these are the material and these are the grains inside it. So at the recrystallization temperature, what is the benefit that even a small applied force can easily change the shape and size of these grains. So this means that at recrystallization temperature, the temperature is just sufficient enough basically to change the shape and size of the grains, thus making the material more ductile and stress relieved. Because when the material acts as a ductile, it can easily flow or the grains can easily slip under the externally applied force, thereby providing an ease of deformation. So this is what the grains, they basically recrystallize in small grains upon application of external force. That is why the name is known as recrystallization temperature. Re means it is the crystallization is happening again, and in this case, only an externally applied force is sufficient to basically break the grains. One crystallization happens when you pour the molten metal in a mold and it gets solidified. So at that time, some recrystallization is happening. So at that time, some grains are formed, their size and shape is defined. Now to change that shape and size, or we can say to recrystallize the material, the recrystallization temperature value comes into picture, where you just heat the material to the recrystallization temperature, which is well below the melting point, and at the same time, you are applying an externally applied force. So externally applied force is just sufficient to break these grains into smaller grains, or in other words, I can say they are just recrystallizing the material. So smaller grains means the material is being easily broken into, or is being the shape is being now easily changed. So all the forming processes that happen above the recrystallization temperature, they are considered as hot forming processes. All the forming processes that happen below the recrystallization temperature are known as cold forming processes. And in the course of this module, we will study how this hot forming or cold forming is beneficial and what are their limitations case by case. So at the recrystallization temperature, so material easily behaves in a plastic manner. So this which allows it to get deformed very easily with less application of force. So why we are so interested? Because we want to apply very less force, because requirement of applying less force is basically linked to the application of input energy. If you want to apply high value of force, that means the input energy to the process is higher, which actually deteriorates the energy efficiency of the process. So that is why we are always interested to find that a golden window where we basically apply minimum force, and by applying minimum force we can extract the maximum plastic deformation. So that value of temperature falls in this range of recrystallization temperature. So recrystallization temperature, it varies greatly from material to material. For example, I consider tin. So tin, for this, even at room temperature, it may be considered as the hot working for this. For steel, the hot working temperature is of the order of 727 degrees centigrade. For aluminium, it is 150 degrees centigrade. And you can observe that this is well below their melting point. If I consider the melting point of steel, so steel melts in this wide temperature range since it is an alloy. And aluminium alloys, they generally melt 690 degrees centigrade to 700 degrees centigrade. So you can see that it is well below its melting point. So for different materials, the recrystallization temperature has a different value. So with this, I just stop here for today to take questions from you. So